continue. Awesome. So officially, I'd like to welcome our guest for today, Alexandra Antoine. Alexandra, if you didn't like I no, I know you loved everything you read on Tuesday, and Alexandra Antoine is. I just so before you all walked in the room, I said that Alexandra is all about joy and love, and she's a joy and pleasure activist for sure. Grounded in action, but a joy and pleasure activist. I had your bio pulled up, and when I closed my screen, I closed it. But I'm going to. Um, you can start sharing your screen, Alexandra, while I do this.
Okay, let me pop it up. Let me pop it up.
Alexandra Antoine is. Oh. Alexandra, when you popped it up and then the bio disappeared. Alexandra,
Oh,
one, huh, too many things happening.
too
Here you
many
go.
tabs open.
Alexandra Antoine is an interdisciplinary artist and farmer based in Chicago, Illinois. Her agricultural work is an acknowledgement and remembrance of our ancestors who worked the land of Haiti, spelled the Taino Arawak's way, we think, while growing her relationship to land. She explores Caribbean foodways, family and memory through storytelling and art. Portraiture, farming, and apprenticing in traditional artistic practices of the African diaspora are all the pathways for her ideas to take form. She holds a BFA in Fine Arts and Arts Education from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And before I officially open the floor to you, and as I said, again, she really there's a way that the reason why Alexandra is here, and as I mentioned on Tuesday, is also because when we think about issues related to identity formations, race, gender, sexuality, ability, et cetera, and this is a natural, perhaps it's a human inclination to go about the problems, what need to be solved about, the trauma, et cetera. Whereas every once in a while in this course, I want to think about the joy and the beauty and the things that are passed on to you very naturally, very generationally, that are identity based, right? Black identities, certainly, but also whatever your identities are in the room, as we previewed on Tuesday. So that's why we're pleased to invite Alexandra to be here with us today. Alexandra, it's all yours. And one more thing, and during the Q&A portion, if you don't mind, having your screen on, and if you have any questions for Alexandra, please say your name and your pronouns before you ask the question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. I'm not on mute, right? You can hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, so as I share my screen, I won't be able to see anything. So if there's any questions in the chat, Mario, you can keep track of it
I will do that.
till
Yeah.
the last bit. But good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with y'all. Let me go ahead and get in presentation mode. Yes, and now I can see no one except Mario. Okay, there we go. So happy to be with you all. Like Mario was saying, my name's Alexandra Antoine. I am based in Chicago, but currently I am back home in Florida. But I'm excited to share this work with you all, and I'll also share like website and things like that and links if I mention anything, if you all are interested in checking that out. Let me work this computer the right way. So before I ever talk about any of the work that I currently do or any projects I'm working on, I always like to give props and honor the land and the place where my people are from, and honor my ancestors as well, because had they not been, I would not be. So I always like to honor Leogan, Haiti, which is where both my parents are from. And this photo is actually the view atop the mountain behind my maternal granddad's house, who was a farmer his entire life and who I believe is one of my closest ancestors in this work that I'm doing right now, because it feels like it's full circle from when I used to go visit him as a child, but I always like to honor my people in this beautiful land of Haiti. And I also, I kept this in here. So when I did this talk previously, I dedicated it to my Matant Lala, who's my aunt. She was my great aunt. But she was someone who showed unconditional love and just like, I mean, just the purest soul. And I didn't get to know all of her life while she was living, but I always like to honor her as well, because I do feel like she is someone that also guides me on this path. And we look so good. Look so good. So in this story, or in this presentation on my work, I do want to start off with some of the foundations and some of the other people who influenced me in my work with food. And like Mario mentioned, I am all about the joy and the happiness. Even though I do acknowledge that trauma and things exist, I am also very much aware of the joys and the fruits and abundance that comes from the work I do, the work my ancestors have done, and the work my elders are doing now. And so it's very important for me to acknowledge our stories and our voices. And when I say that, I mean honoring the personal story from that person's perspectives. And so some of the authors I've been looking at so far, they are in the culinary space, but in various components. So some people are culinary historians, some people are chefs, some people just like do pop-up events or things like that, or some people write about people who work in food or who are a part of the cooking space throughout the diaspora. So Chef Kwame Onwuachi, at the top left here, who wrote Notes from a Young Black Chef, his autobiography. Some people may be familiar with Michael Twitty and The Cooking Gene. And that was very much influential in some of the other work I've done, where I've looked at Jewish cuisine too, and understanding the similarities between African diasporic cuisine as well as Jewish history and Jewish cuisine. Sean Sherman, who's the author of The Sous Chef, and he is the brains and his whole team behind Owami, which is in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it's one of the first indigenous restaurants. So everything on the menu is indigenous products, as well as Zoe Ajanye, who right here under Kwame's book, she has the book Zoe's Ghana Kitchen, where she talks a lot about how she returned back to Ghana and her relationship to Guyanese food through her father, but then her not reinterpretation, but just like continuing on the understanding of her culture through culinary food. And so I first like to start by showing these food collages that I did. But prior to this, I still do work in like painting and printmaking and various other mediums. But during 2020, when everyone was home, the time where I like to call the global pause, where we were all just paused and like where we were, I came back home to Florida just to be like in a sunny place and surrounded by like nature of some kind. And during that time, I was hearing a lot about the trauma, like people dying, there's no food, and like Black and brown communities have no food and lack resources. Now, like I said, I do understand that there is some truth in these. But then at the same time, as I was listening to that, I was also watching my mom go to her backyard and pick herbs and leaves and make tea that was helping me relieve pain, or like helping with constipation or gas or headache or migraine. So while I was getting this one perspective from like Western media, I was also understanding in front of my face like the healing powers of ancestral foods. Many of these plants she actually got from Haiti. Somehow she was able to bring it in. But the fact that they are producing now, and she continues to still use like some of these leaves and some of these plants in her cooking. To me, I said, okay, in that moment, I was like, yes, there may be food shortages. Yes, there is an issue in the food system, but we also must remember as Black folks, as folks of the African diaspora, that we have the knowledge, like we have the skill, we just need to remember it. And it was amazing to see a lot of people at that time farming, like they started growing things in their backyard or like doing things on the windowsill. So to me, it was more of a validation, like, yes, we know the power of food, we just have to remember this. And at the time I had a lot of fashion magazines. Well, they weren't necessarily fashion magazines, they were magazines that were centered around the African diaspora in various areas. So fashion, art, tech. And then I also had a very large collection of food magazines. And so at the time I said, how could I share this idea I have of us remembering our abundance, remembering our beauty, our creativity when it comes to food? And so that's where the food collages were born. So this one that you see on the screen is called Visions of Growth. And I usually title them in reference to an ingredient that's in there, like a main ingredient or something that represents that ingredient. So thinking about the mushrooms and just like the intelligence that they have in and of themselves. This next one is Carnival Roots. And this one I actually was inspired to by Carnival in the Caribbean islands. And if you know, Carnival is a celebration of everything: music, life, food, drinks, all of that. Um, and then this one is one of the few ones that I still have, uh, called Soaring Prince Above Chanterelle Blooms. And this one, for some reason, I could not bring myself to sell this one. And at the time when I was offering these to the community, I was pricing very affordably because I just wanted people to have them. And it was kind of cool because a lot of people who bought them, they were Black and brown folks. Some of them even worked in food industries, either as farmers or as chefs. So that was nice to see. But it was cool that the vision I had was actually going out into the world as I saw it and as I intended for it. But this one is one of the last ones that like I kept for myself. And after this series of collages that I did, I got the opportunity to be commissioned to design the Fresh Mobile Moves Market that UGC has. So Urban Growers Collective, I'm not sure how many of you know about them, but they're a farm in South Chicago. And so I've been farming there for almost 2 years now. But they were getting ready to launch their new mobile market bus, which goes throughout the south and west sides of Chicago. And it provides like affordable produce, some of which is grown on the farm, all of which comes from like either farmers or like local producers. And so they teamed up with Barilla, which is the pasta company, to have this commission be done. And everyone who's on the bus, I intentionally chose people who either work with UGC or are related to people who work with UGC, because I wanted people to see themselves, not only the employees to see themselves, but the communities that that the bus is going into, for those people to see themselves with food, not in a struggling way, but in a like happy, like proud, abundant type of way. So that was a cool opportunity that came out of that. And it was nice to literally see like fresh produce at a very affordable price and just abundance, like literally traveling throughout the streets of Chicago. Um, mhm. And so this next project I wanted to touch on was actually one that I did with Mario at the Haitian American Museum of Chicago a few years ago. I want to say, like, what was it, 2021, where we looked at Asoto Saint. So Mario approached me about creating visuals to go along with the work of some of the work that he was researching of Asoto Saint, who I had not known at the time, but all the documents that Mario sent me, I read through everything and then looked up some things on my own. But this exhibition that we put together, which was a series of food collages, as well as the installation itself, played a part because we wanted to showcase like a living room style in the installation format, like you were coming into like a home space. But all of the food collages showcase people who have passed. And they're all part of the LGBTQ community in Haiti, but we also reference Asoto Saint as well. And Mario created altar as well, and I did the painting and the installation part on the wall. And then he also had a timeline of Asoto Saint on there, which explained to viewers or people who are new to it, to the show, like where the inspiration for this came from. And I thought it came out amazingly well. And even during the talk that we did, there were folks in the Zoom room that actually knew Asoto. So that was nice. And got to see how we interpreted his life or what we read about his life. This is more of a view of the museum space and the installation space, because it was very important for me to bring in like color and just like warmth and not just have pieces be up against a white wall just because it's in a museum institution space. And the design also guided you throughout the space as well. And I have one picture here, and Mario's included in one of the collages at the top right here, the top right. And okay, it's not blurry. So this one is the altar space. Zoom in on the altar space that we had a photo of Asoto on there as well. But then it was a large altar installation space that Mario designed. So that was one way that then my love and passion my love and passion for food and just Black folks like came together in a way that honored memory. Hold on, Alan. Hold on, Alan. That's my nephew who's in the building. And so honoring memory, honoring our ancestors, honoring people's lived experiences through food was very joyful for me. Give me 1 second. Alan, go sit in the living room, okay? I'm gonna come get you when I'm done. Okay. And that is what we call life. Yes. Okay, so I'll now move on to this next project I did. This was a letterpress piece or a letterpress collection of work that I did in North Carolina while I was at Penland School of Crafts. And I am a printmaker, like I've been printmaking for years, but have never done letterpress. So my intention was to go there and learn the art of letterpress. And one thing that was really cool about that practice was that it forces you to translate your ideas into words. So as someone who primarily had worked with like paintings and like visual things only, or creating visual imagery only, to have to translate that idea into text format on like certain scales of paper, it was actually a pretty cool experience for me. And this piece here was one of the first that I did about Black folks, and basically that we are the authors of our culinary traditions, because understanding within my research that I've read from people's stories who've come before me and their journeys through food, either through their own travels or through working with food, understanding that a lot of these recipes that we do have in our communities, we are the authors of those, and it is our responsibility. And well, I see it as an honor to share these things, but like these are our stories to tell in our voices. Because if not, when it is told by someone who does not know the depth or the history of it all, you can have that. Then it becomes like a little shifted. But I do think it's very important for us as Black folks to be the authors of our culinary traditions. I did actually, and you'll see it maybe some of them, some of the letterpress prints that I did include some imagery, because there are techniques and ways to do that, but I made it very minimal so that the focus is on the text as well. This other piece, and these are just the series that I'll go through. So this one, Our Plates Hold Our Stories, also has imagery of certain ingredients that I love, but that are common throughout the African diaspora. So rice, black-eyed peas, clove, okra, Scotch bonnet pepper, yams, like actual yams, not sweet potatoes. But just visually explaining my ideas, but then like in a bold statement as well. And this one, this print, Alan, can you go wait outside, please? So this piece, I'm glad this is being recorded. This piece, Migration, Revolution, Displacement, and Triumph are in the sauces, herbs, meats, and breads. This one came about after reading and understanding how revolutionaries or revolutions happen like around food, especially looking at the Haitian Revolution and the importance of soup jumeau that all Haitians eat on January 1st. Looking at certain events in Jewish history and the foods that they eat, certain foods that are eaten in West Africa that tie back to times of the revolution when things have happened. But just understanding that food is always playing a part in our lives, whether we recognize it or not. But this print, I felt like said it all. Because when you look at ingredients, you can learn history by learning about food, because you learn migration, you learn displacement, you learn about all types of things, that traumas and everything that have happened through ingredients and where they are eaten in the present day now. And this one was a fun one I just did, where I basically was talking about epis, which is the fundamental Haitian seasoning, which is also very similar to sofrito in Latin cuisine. But this one, I pictured this in a Haitian chef's kitchen. So I was like, let me make a print of something that I would want to have in my kitchen. So that was that print. And then this series, hold on, give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So this one is a series that I titled I Followed the Drinking Gourd and It Led Me to Myself, Love, and Community. And this print was inspired by the book Vibration Cooking by Vertamae Smarts Grevner. And she was someone, after I read her book, she basically sort of gave me like the permission, or I felt like I had the permission to really write and really showcase my writings. So each of these, there's 5 posters of these looking at 5 foods of the diaspora. So hibiscus, yuca, black-eyed peas, collard greens, and then okra. And so each poster, and they're all like 12 by 19 size, large size posters. Each one has writing dedicated to whatever crop that I'm focusing on in it. And the writing talks about my travels and my experiences with that particular food, whether it was made into a dish or a drink. And I also intentionally use language around certain foods. So with hibiscus, I intentionally say Jamaica, I say sorrel, I say Teshu Black, which is how we say it in Creole, but just honoring how everyone else knows the drink as well. And I know there's like 5 more names that I left out, but just honoring the different places that the plant has touched and the other people's relationship to it as well. And each piece has a photograph of the place I'm referencing, but then it also has the background is a repeat pattern that I screen printed of the crop. Like I broke the pieces apart and made a repeat background. And then there's also on the topmost layer a hand beaded sequence of the word as well. Just because I had to add a whole bunch to it. But there's 25 of each poster. So each one has like its own hand sewn word into it. And these are also on my website too, where it has the poem like written out so you can actually read it. Because I know it might be too tiny right here for you all to see. And so I'm just going to go through all of them. Oh, and let me also mention, so hibiscus, I was referencing Haiti, because that's also Haiti's national flower as well. Okra, I referenced Savannah, Georgia. Collard greens, I referenced actually South Chicago because that's the first time I saw it growing, and that's the first time I started a relationship with it like in the ground as opposed to just eating it on a plate. Black eyed peas, I reference Bahia, Brazil, which is the first time I had acarajé, which is like a black eyed pea fritter. But that was the first time I had black eyed peas that weren't in the pea form, like they were transformed. And it was also fried in palm oil, which is something I wasn't accustomed to eating all the time. But just the memory behind that dish in relationship to spiritual practice, in relationship to Afro-Brazilian history and culture, that was very important for me to reference in this particular writing. And yuca, I reference Havana, Cuba, which is where I feel like I had the best yuca fries, best yuca everything. So I talk about that as well in that piece. This particular project I did with In Care of Black Women, which is actually a Chicago-based, I guess you could say, organization, but they're based in Woodlawn, and a friend of mine who co-runs it invited a lot of Black women who non-binary, all of that, to come and create benches or one-seaters. And so we learned how to construct these one-seaters. Well, I made a one-seater out of wood, and then we were able to just design it however we wanted. So of course, for me, I said, let me see what this would look like with a food collage on it. And then I also painted on the side some of the crops that I grew that summer. So some okra, Mississippi purple whole peas, and some chives. And there's more on the other legs that I didn't get to, but just adding in like mosaic tiles, and seeing this as a functional way to use like food collages. So I'm always thinking about, as an artist, what ways art can be shared that isn't always just you come into a room and you look at it on a wall. But like, is there something you could touch? Is there something you could eat? Is there something you could listen to, like in relationship to the work that's being shared? So that was that piece. And I actually gave it back to In Care of Black Women for their archives. So they will have it now forever. But I will be making more of those. And another part of my practice with food is documenting myself, because when I do Google searches for like farmers or just like images, like for real images, not like, because there's some images where it just constantly shows people in labor, and it's like, well, no, I want to see the picture of me enjoying my harvest, or I want to see the picture of my hand holding something. So throughout my farm practice, I've been actively photographing my hands holding things, or like myself at the farm, like pulling something out or just holding it on display. And these, I have the names of everything I'm holding to right next to it. So these are purple Mississippi whole peas, watermelon, tomatoes, and also sharing these on social media, because it's like, I also have learned that people are inspired when they see you doing something and they constantly see the abundance of food that you're sharing. It does push other people to start as well, or at least that's what they've told me. So I just love the fact that I am in the picture and I don't have to search Google and be like, I need a hand holding like a bitter melon, which is what I'm holding on the right here. Because chances are I'm not gonna see my hand. So now I have my own documentation picture. And this also helps if I want to turn this into a book or something, or if I want to turn it into like use it for video or film projects or something. So that's been very important. This here is okra, but it's also known as mabenda in Kiswahili, because I recently went to Kenya in the end of December, like through the new year, and was actively searching for okra because that's one of my favorite crops. So I always try, whenever I'm in any part of the African diaspora, I like to search out certain crops just to see how they're made, learn about recipes, how they're eaten in that particular place. And connecting through food is something that I started at the end of last year through a dinner that I hosted, my first ever dinner. In this particular event, I wanted to have food be a centerpiece for memory and honoring our ancestors, but then also be a space where people who didn't know each other could come together and share their experiences with who would start as strangers, but they would leave as friends. And so that was also inspired too by my travels through the diaspora, and just the way people eat is very communal as opposed to just by yourself or having even just your own plate. Like a lot of times there was the sharing of the plate, and even the connection with the food through your physical hands as opposed to utensils. And each place learning why that was. Because at first some people could be like, well, that's unsanitary. But then when you really understand like the history and why it's done, it's like, oh, okay, there is a deeper connection with the food through that way. And this is, before I get to the dinner, show you the photos from the dinner. This was me learning how to make acarajé, which I featured in the print I showed previously, from an Afro-Brazilian chef. So this was right in the middle of the pandemic, and my friends put something together where we learned how to make this dish from the chef, who she also has a cookbook, but she's also part of a group of women who are keeping Afro-Brazilian dishes, like ancestral foods, I don't want to say alive, but they're keeping it like relevant by teaching it to the younger generation and documenting it in books and things like that. And that acarajé came out really, really good. It is a process, but it's definitely something that everybody can try. This was also me learning how to make supjumu, which is the dish that all Haitians eat on January 1st to represent Haitian Independence Day. But this was me learning it from one of my aunts, like standing side by side with her throughout the whole process, documenting the recipe in Haitian Creole, because I wanted to honor the way she was giving it to me. So she was speaking it to me in Creole. So I said, let me document this in Creole as opposed to having to translate everything. And I also knew I could do that because I had already been practicing writing Creole for a while. But just keeping it that way. So when I share it, I'll share it in Creole with folks. But just like standing in her kitchen side by side, asking her like, when did she learn how to make this, or like who taught her, and what does this mean for her? Just that experience too also ties in to how I see my process of working with food and community. And this here, I believe the reading on the right here is one of the readings that I maybe sent you, Mario. But this was the Gastropodex Dinner that I hosted at Fluxus Contemporary Gallery in South Loop in December of last year. And in this dinner, it also went with a 2-person show that I was in. So it was me and Kirk Henry, who's an author based out of Atlanta, or artist based out of Atlanta. And so the whole exhibition was around food. And so I thought, well, why not have a dinner where we talk about memory and ancestry, a lot of what the work was inspired by. So this was me prepping. It was a 3-course meal. This was me prepping the entree. And then I also teamed up with the culinary arts teacher at Simeon Academy and some of the culinary students there to test out recipes, like help me prep ingredients. I was at Simeon's doing some goat for like 12, 18 hours. But just having them also work with me as well and just be another, it was like the generation after me. Like we were all working together to make this happen, and understanding too, like how in other ways we could serve food as opposed to it just being like a catering event. Like, no, we're serving this food and this is what each plate means. So when we talk to people about the ingredients, like that's what we also talk about. And it was important for me to do it in community because no one like cooks by themselves for 20, 25 people. So I was like, I need help and I want these particular groups of people to help me. So I need young people there. I need seasoned chefs there. And all the recipes, myself and the culinary arts teacher and another friend of mine who's a chef, we developed. And then we proceeded. I did the bulk of the cooking. But then we all like tasted and gave our feedback in between everything. And so in preparation for that, you'll see the picture on the left, this was me bringing the books and things like that to the kitchen at Simeon to really explain like the depth behind the inspiration of this thing. So I had physical things there for people to look at and read some of my own artwork for them to touch and like really check it out. And then you'll see some of the images on the left is our prep work. So us julienning some carrots together, me making a big old batch of epis, and also sharing it with some of the students because some of them didn't know what like epis was or had never had hibiscus. So it was cool to like share that with them too. As we talked about, like, yeah, what did we grow up eating? Like, what did you have eating growing up? And then I told them, some of the dishes I thoroughly enjoyed growing up. And this is us in the back half of the gallery. And it was important for me to have it in an art space as opposed to renting out like a space that's designed to be used like for dinners. Because one, why not? Like I have a show there, so why not use that space also as a dinner place? But then also like bringing in the food. Like food doesn't always have to be in a food setting, or it doesn't always have to be enjoyed in a food setting. So what does it look like to talk about these things surrounded by artwork? And you can't see it in these pictures, but where everyone was sitting, it was actually around my artwork and Kirk's artwork. So they were seeing our interpretations of food and memory as they were actually partaking in the meal. And these were some of the pieces that I had on display in the gallery as well. So this was a food collage. She can dine with the best of them. This was a painting and an installation. So this is my first time playing around with actually having food in an installation of the work. So instead of just having, no, that's my aunt. So instead of just having the painting, I had the painting of my aunt who, there's 2 paintings, they're both aunts of mine, and they both fed me all the time and still do when I go visit their homes. But so I wanted to have their painting, but then also have an installation of foods that they would cook for me. So this particular aunt always had a pot of rice, some beans, cornmeal, and these are ingredients that folks throughout the diaspora recognize as well. And I definitely wanted to have that pot, because that pot that's in the picture is what we use to make rice. And so there were some people who came in and were like, oh yeah, I have that pot too. Like, yeah, that's the pot. And it also builds that relationship too of like, okay, I see you and I know you recognize this too. So that familiarity as well. But I definitely wanted to make sure I had like ingredients that I always ate in the installation as well. And this is just the first iteration of this. I'm sure it'll transform into something else down the line. This particular one was my aunt, my Mathandeni's, and she was the first person to make like fresh lemonade for me. Which sounds like such a simple thing, but when the care she took in picking off all the limes and lemons from the tree, going to get the sugar, going to get the water, pressing it herself or like squeezing it out herself, like that in and of itself, and the memory as well as the taste of what it was always stuck with me. So this installation was honoring that part. So I actually had like sugar in there as well. I went and got like the lemon squeeze thing and had that tie into this installation. And this, let me see what time. So this image is of a farm in Nairobi, Kenya, where I was, one of the cities I was at in Kenya. And I also made a video, which is only 4 minutes long, but I want to make sure I keep time for questions. So Mario, is it cool if I show the video?
Yes, that's fine.
Film? Okay. So this film project came about because like some of the work I was showing before that had the writings and the posters, I also listened to a lot of podcasts. So I was like, what would it look like if I not made a podcast? Because I'm like, that's time right now that I don't have for that. But what if I did like film and like some type of moving image in with it? So I compiled a lot of my photos that I took in Kenya. And while I was taking these pictures, I didn't know they would later be put into use for this film thing. But I'm so glad I did because they very much worked. So this is me reciting a poem I did on Nairobi, along with the visuals behind it. So let me share that screen. And I believe the sound should work too. Oh, play. From the Midwest, I began. 19 hours later, landing in Kenya. Excited to be in East Africa for the first time. Alone, except for a few contacts from a dear friend. One thing was for sure, Kenyan cuisine and its culinary traditions I needed to experience with the locals. Nairobi felt familiar, from the fast swerving painted matatus, similar to Haitian top-tops, to the red earth and fertile farmland I saw. It felt like a place I already knew. Yet when I was approached and asked questions by the locals, with Swahili words I would come to learn later, I stood in silence, unable to respond back in words other than English. It was then I decided that Swahili would be amongst the languages I spoke. A few days into my trip, I met up with Alice, my Nairobi cooking host, on a hot afternoon, a few minutes walk from her house near a small corner grocery store. The night before, we decided on making ugali, as I had asked her for a nice intro dish to Kenya. We proceeded to purchase the beef along with the kale and collards mixture and headed to her home kitchen, where the other ingredients awaited us. Ugali and sukuma wiki with beef, kachumbari, all ingredients I love and know, white cornmeal, kale, collards, tomatoes, onions, avocados. Ugali, a firm corn-based fufu, reminds me of Haitian maimule and Venezuelan arepas. The textures may all be different, but the corn base is the same. Sukuma wiki, a greens mixture simmered with spices and tomatoes, reminding me of slow-cooked southern greens, but with a nice acid component. Cachumbari, identical to Mexican pico de gallo, but eaten alongside your meal as opposed to being a dip. As Alice and I became fast friends, I was invited to her husband's family village for Christmas. As I was traveling in the middle of the holidays and knew people would be out of town gathering with loved ones. Kibirigui, a village about 2 hours north of Nairobi, with plenty of coffee plants and fertile land, where the goat had been slaughtered the day we arrived, and the women prepared themselves to cook the meals. I sat close by, observing and ready to help if needed. One dish I learned to prepare, chapati, a flatbread very similar to Indian naan, but unleavened, and just as delicious. This would later be eaten with goat and kachumbari late into the night, with a hefty cup of maratina, a light brown Kenyan wine made of honey, sugarcane, and maratina, a Kenyan fruit. Before leaving them and heading back to Nairobi, Alice and I spoke about the similarities between our cultural cuisines, especially the use of matoke, plantains, which I saw everywhere, something I grew up eating, either boiled for breakfast or fried at parties. Alice said she never had them fried. So as night approached, I made some bun and pizza, Haitian fried plantains, cooking for her and her family this time, even if just a side dish. Arriving back in Nairobi, I checked out the malls that people mentioned to me before my trip, ate lots of pastries at Art Cafe, a local chain restaurant, and took in all of the scenic spots where giraffes, hippos, and rhinos roam, while taking in the abundance of flora and fauna native to the region. All right. And so that's that video. And I did want to say that I am currently like constantly thinking of different ways of how to express my love of food and people. So it's taken forms of like books. This recent one was like a video montage I created. But I'm also planning more dinners as well around Chicago for this year. But just thinking, always thinking about different ways to make it tangible for people and different ways to share it with various community members as well. And that is my talk.
Well, thank you so much, Alexandra. I'll give her a round of applause. Thank you. It's coming in. Um, do you have, we can, now it's a dialogue time. Any questions for Alexandra? And in turn, Alexandra, if you have any questions for them, that maybe will motivate them to think about. No, but maybe one of my questions for to open up the discussion is, what about Alexandra's offering that resonate with you, and that you know, what are points of connection you're making with Alexandra's presentation and everything she's talked about, especially given that we did a bit of an exercise on Tuesday. So I'd love to hear from you, and she just gave to us. Let's give her something back. Don't be shy.
Or if you have comments and props, words of affirmation, I'm here for it.
I guess I'll start. Oh, you go ahead.
Okay. I just really enjoyed your talk, because I myself, like, before a few years ago, like, we didn't like go like travel internationally. So seeing all the places you've been and the types of foods you've encountered and like your ancestry, like the foods you come from, I just thought it was super cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that is that's one of the reasons too why I like to share, because I do like to, one, show people that they can do it too, even if it's just regional. Like if you can't travel internationally yet, like if you travel to the South or different parts of the Midwest, like what things are out there, or what dishes have historical significance or even evolving now, like people are evolving them now. But no, I love to share that energy out there, because I don't just do it for me. I do it for everybody else too. But thank you for that.
I have something to add. I really liked how you said you don't have to travel internationally, and what's so great about living in Chicago is that we are very diverse, that we have
Mhm.
options, we can try Jamaican food, we can try Hispanic food, we can try Haitian food, and and that's really cool about living in Chicago, is having that. And then in the video, I like how did you say that was fufu being made?
Yeah, it was similar to fufu. It's a
You know,
firmer texture, but it's very similar.
it's really funny because I remember on TikTok, fufu blew up. Like people, yeah, it blew up on TikTok. People were trying it, and I was always wanting to try it. So I found that to be very interesting, and it was a really amazing video and everything put together. And your voice is very soothing as well.
Oh, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. I didn't know that about fufu and TikTok. See, I need to get on TikTok, because but that's cool that blew up, because most people don't know about fufu.
Yeah,
It's a very filling dish too. Like it fills you up really good, and it's pretty easy to make.
it was all over TikTok, and I was like, everything on TikTok, people always want to try. So I was like, trying that.
No, that's amazing.
What is fufu, Alexandra? And then Korea
So
next.
okay, so fufu is it's usually a starch. So it's either like corn, yam, cassava, and it's like pounded with usually water. Like people will add water to it to like make it smooth enough. But it's usually pounded in a particular way to get that like nice smooth ball shape. And it's eaten with either a meat base like sauce, or like okra stew, beef, chicken. You can make it vegan too, like a vegan sauce or something as well. But it's very filling
It's
and it's
kind of
good.
like, instead of using bread, they use
Yes,
fufu. That's what, yeah, instead of using bread, they
yes,
use fufu to grab the stew and then they eat it, which I
yes.
found very interesting because in my culture, Middle Eastern, we use bread, like with our sauces,
Ah,
there's a lot of bread, and then I noticed that fufu was similar to that.
yes. And see, in Haitian culture, we use rice. So rice go with a lot of everything.
So same here. We use a lot of rice too. It's dangerous.
Korean.
Oh, I guess I was just gonna say, when you mentioned, or I guess in that part where you were, you had the display of your aunt, and then you had the rices, and then you had the pot, and you mentioned that, like, I guess some staples of the kitchen just kind of are familiar to all of us. I remember saying in class earlier, this week, like, that pot is definitely something that's familiar to me. And I feel like maybe a lot of other people, just because, like, my family are from the South, and like a pot means like stewing, it means gum. It's like, like everyone is coming together, and it's like a communal thing that people, like, eat out of. So I like heavily resonated with.
That's a great comment. Especially, I would say that I know from my family and a lot of Haitian families and some people in the Caribbean that a pot only gets better
Okay.
because the more you cook it, like there's like it's the more like even the pot, the container, it's the more seasoned, the more you cook in it, the more it accumulates whatever it is that coats it. That's what makes it better over time. And folks loathe to throw away pots because there's a memory to it also, I think they're saying. Not only like it's a physical thing, but it gets better. Not unlike us here where like if it starts to look old, we throw it out. It's like no, it gets even better.
Yeah, and there's like, this is something I'm starting to do now, is as I travel, collect like certain utensils. But the utensils that I see being used often in preparation. So when I was in Kenya, there was like this wooden spoon that is the shape of it. It wasn't like drastically different or anything, but that was the spoon that everyone had in their house. So I'm like, and I will be going back there again the end of this year. But I was like, next time I'm there, I need that spoon. Like, I just want to collect that spoon and have that be as like a part of a centerpiece on a dinner that I do. Just like things that when people come, like they're like, okay, I know this. Like, I know that. Similar to the pot.
Shileme, give me 1 second. You'll next after us ask this question. Well, there are a couple of comments in the question, and then Shileme is next. The two comments, one is from Fartoon, who says, ugali is something that they eat too. So it was interesting to see all these meals that they are familiar with being in the video, the making of the meal.
Mm.
And then Lily says, I love the way you incorporate food in your art. Food and cooking are huge parts of their life as well. So that really resonated with them. And Kiara asked, what food was the most difficult to make out of all of, I guess, the Kenyan food, maybe? And
Yes.
and one more thing, and Will has a similar thing with their family, the tortilla press.
Oh, I
That
know about those presses.
grandmother use has been passed, oh wow, down since 1877. So another point to think that food is not something that only nourishes your belly, but it nourishes your soul, but generations, it's part of your identity as well. So go ahead, Alexandra.
What was I gonna say? Oh, so I was gonna say one of the foods, it wasn't difficult. It just took time, was Kenyan pilau. So the pilau dish is like rice with what I felt like were like 10 different spices. So the spice part alone took a while because I was buying each individual spice to grind up and then mix together. So it wasn't difficult, but I was like, this rice takes a while. Like most, I feel like most dishes I eat all the time, like they taste better the longer they take to cook. But that one was an experience that I would try again, but it was an experience the first time.
Awesome. Shileme?
Yeah, for me, it was I don't know if this was like meant to be, well, it's a question because when you were talking about the little balls that you made, I think they might have looked like, to me they look like falafels, but they were white.
Oh
But
yeah.
you said that you were trying to keep it you changed the word from keeping alive to making it more common or more known. So was that like a term like that I don't know, like is it important to be careful about the words that we use when we're talking about like traditional foods? Like whenever I cook something traditional, like that's Mexican, like is it important to not say keeping alive?
Yeah, because the thing, I do feel like these things are not, a lot of these recipes aren't dying. They're just not being talked about, but I don't necessarily feel that they're disappearing. So I feel like keeping it going, like another term aside from, yeah, because I'm like, I don't like to think that, because there are a lot of things in my culture and other cultures of diaspora, they're not dying. It's just that people haven't like read about it yet, or they're not paying as much attention to it, but it is there. So like the Afro-Brazilian chefs are there. But for me, I'm like purposely and intentionally like seeking them out and being like, okay, I'm gonna stand next to you real quick as you do this thing. But like they're gonna keep making a carajé, like they're gonna keep making the dishes. It's just for me to like, okay, I want to keep this going and share with my friends too. But yes, that is a good point.
Yeah, this goes back to like one of the discussions we had during the first week, I think, when we're talking about legacies. I think I had a quote from a Nigerian philosopher who says, "Legacies and traditions, they're always at your disposal. The people put them at your disposal of especially the younger generations. Now it's that generation, is it, do they feel a sense of responsibility or duty, or what is their ethics around that? Because it's at your disposal. It's up to you to pick it up and pass the ball along. I think that's what you're also saying.
Yes, exactly.
Especially in a space like in the U.S. So again, I like what you said, Tamara, about yeah, there's so much food available in Chicago and so much good food for those people who can afford it and have access to it, right? But there's a tendency, and I can say this because I'm at UIC with you all, that it's probably easier to grab a coffee, grab a bagel, and in the middle of the day, grab like Chick-fil-A, and then at the end of the night, grab a slice of pizza because we're busy, right? And we do that, often and often and often, and then the home food that it's like a special occasion. So it's not to belittle that, but it's a reality, and it's where maybe the food doesn't get activated as much, I would say. Um, I have a question, and I think we have 4 minutes. But the question, Alexandra, has to do with your portrait, with your portraiture. What is, and not that you need to tell us what.
It's blurry. Oh, go ahead.
I wonder, like, if there's one. I mean, what is one thing you'd like audiences or viewers to begin to understand when you juxtapose food and portraits of Black folks?
Mm.
Like, what are you getting at without like beating us over the head with it? Because no, because I mean, I believe that art is also in the eye of the viewer, right? So you don't want to be too prescriptive, but you have an intention behind it. So what is your intention?
Well, my intention because a lot of the portraits that I make are people I know. So they're either family or like close friends. And that's very intentional because I paint my life, and those are people who I have relationships with. And when people ask me about them, I can actually speak to the person, like on a personal level. Like I don't really paint celebrities or things like that. Like it's for me, I'm like, I love seeing my people on canvases or on whatever material it is, like being displayed in my particular style. And then also there was something I was gonna say, but I just lost my train of thought. But I do love like just showcasing my people. And growing up, that's what I was gonna say. Growing up, my mom collected, okay, I don't know if she collected art, but she bought more art than like I guess some of my friends' parents had around their house, but she always had Haitian art in the house. So growing up, I always saw like scenes of Haiti or scenes of the marketplace with the women. So my approach to art was that. So when I actually was learning art in school, like college, I was like, what is it? Like, where are my people? Like, what is this? Because I saw this already. Like I saw my people already. So I don't get why in art history I'm not seeing it. So for me, that was like, all right, so now I'm really about to just like show my people and the people I want to see on there. And the food aspect added another layer to it because different people got different things. Like some people are like, oh, because the women cook and things like that. Other people was like, oh, that's like my auntie. Like my auntie does that. Like she cooks in this particular pot and does this for me as well. But it was just nice for me to show like more of an aspect about the person instead, like also show their visual, like their portrait, but then also show different aspects of them, of who they are.
I think elsewhere you also talk about fullness and plenitude. So like
Yes.
making them a little bit more like multi-dimensional for real.
Yes. And that is where I'll be playing around too with some of my combinations of portraits and adding like foods in abundance around them so that those iterations will come.
So this is it. We're out of time. We're just.
There's a comment in the chat though.
Yeah, there's one more comment in the chat from Yvonne who says the pot discussion is funny to them because they remember being a kid and feeling like a certain food wasn't cooked in their dedicated pot. It just didn't taste the same. So
which I 100% agree with. rice and that pot, it hit different.
So we'll stop at this. We'll stop here for now. And also know that Alexandra will join us later this semester.
Oh yeah.
You have to do a creative project, and they will be sort of help us with that. But please, big round of applause to Alexandra before you leave us and continue the rest of the
Me
week.
and my nephew who's making a cameo.
Well, and see you next Tuesday. All right.
Yes.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Peace, y'all. Thank you all.
Enjoy your
Thank
weekend.
you.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Mario in his class on.